Hello friends, welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to do a different kind of video. I don't think I've ever done one of these before. Essentially, because it's the end of the year, everything's winding down, all of the new releases for 2025 have already happened. I thought it might be fun to make some predictions on the next year. For example, what's Apple gonna do with their new Apple Watch Series 12 or Ultra 4, whatever comes out? Just make some guesses and some educated predictions on what I think the future might hold. I thought this might be a fun game for us all to play, so if you want to play along, make sure to comment down below and let me know what you think is going to happen in the next year. We're going to be talking about a bunch of different brands today. We've got Apple, Garmin, COROS, Polar, Suunto, Amazfit, Samsung, Google, all of the major brands in sort of the health, sports, fitness, smartwatch space. And just as a disclaimer, I mainly talk about like the fitness and health side of things when it comes to these watches, but we'll talk generally as well. Okay, let's dive right into it. And the first brand I want to talk about in this video is going to be Apple. I've got the Apple Watch Series 11 here that just came out this past September. And the thing about Apple is they are very predictable. Every single year in that September timeframe, they host a media event and they release their next new thing. Now, sometimes the next new thing isn't all that exciting, and we saw that happen with the Apple Watch Ultra 2 last year. The Ultra 3 was a little bit more exciting because it got satellite communication, as we all know, and I thought that was pretty cool. I don't know about you. But even though Apple is predictable in their release schedule, happening pretty much every September religiously with the iPhone, they're not so predictable when it comes to what new features or what's going to change about their watches. Let's start with the low-hanging fruit because I'm pretty confident in these predictions. I'm pretty confident with like 99% certainty that Apple will release a new Apple Watch Series 12 update from the Series 11. They'll release an Ultra 4 to the Ultra 3, and they will release a new Apple Watch SE 4. However, my theory is that in 2026, the design of these watches will not change significantly. Like the Apple Watch rounded edge sort of standard look that we've had for a long time won't change. I don't think they're going to do a major overhaul on these watches, and I do think we will have to wait until like late 2027, 2028 to see a significant change on these watches. With that said, I do keep my finger on the pulse of all of the rumor sites about these watches, and one that stood out to me that I do think we'll get is Touch ID on an Apple Watch. Now just imagine this for a minute. You're out and about, you've locked your Apple Watch so you can't get into it, you got to do the little pin code on the screen. Imagine if you could just touch the button on the side with your finger, it would scan your fingerprint, and you could unlock your watch with Touch ID. That would be super cool. It would also be useful for things like NFC payments or Apple Pay. When you want to go make a purchase, you could just use your finger to authenticate that, or even other things alongside that. Another thing I think that will happen is that Apple will bring satellite messaging and communication to not just the Ultra series watches, but I think it will also trickle down into the Series 12 as well. We've seen this in the past where, you know, a flagship feature is in the most expensive model and everyone needs to buy that to get the feature. But I think moving forward, we'll see that satellite messaging feature trickle down to the smaller watches as well, or at least I hope, because it's a really cool feature. On the topic of health and wellness, we did see Apple add hypertension alerts for monitoring your blood pressure to these watches in 2025, which was a nice feature to get. But I do think in moving into 2026, they're going to expand on this, and they're not just going to give you hypertension alerts, but I'm hoping that they actually get FDA approval to give you some insight into your blood pressure, like giving you your actual measurements of systolic and diastolic pressure, instead of just giving you that notification that lets you know that you should take a measurement with a blood pressure cuff. I know that technology exists because there's some other brands out there trying to do this. For example, the Whoop band, which I have around here somewhere, has blood pressure insights, which they got into some trouble with, but legally they got into trouble with. But I do think the technology exists. It might not be perfect, but I'm hoping Apple, being Apple and having so many resources in engineering, that they could come up with to do this, because that would be super cool. On top of that, another feature I've seen in the rumor mills and in a lot of discussion about is blood sugar monitoring or glucose monitoring on a watch without penetrating your skin or using any kind of sensor. That's another thing I think Apple is capable of doing. Again, I know that technology exists. I actually saw it at CES last year. There were a couple of companies that came up with that technology to measure blood glucose from an optical sensor, which I thought was super cool. And again, I think Apple would be a good place to start with that. Those are just some high level pie in the sky ideas. As for which ones are realistic, I would say I don't think the design's going to change. I do think they're going to add some new health metrics in there, and I think there'll be a bump in battery life, I hope. Moving right along into the next brand I want to talk about here, and that is Google. This is the Google Pixel Watch 4, and they did a lot of really interesting things with the Pixel Watch 4. This is the first smartwatch that we saw here in the USA that featured satellite communication. However, it was only for SOS, and it's the first user repairable watch, which we've also seen from a major brand in the United States, which is kind of wild. It means you can buy individual components for this watch, like the display or the battery, and replace them yourself at home. Google is an interesting brand, and it's really hard for me to predict what they're going to do, because I do think they take some major swings with their new features and innovation. Even though the Pixel Watch 4 looks a lot like the Pixel Watch 3 and the 2, it brought a lot more to the table. And if you haven't seen my full review on this watch, I actually liked it quite a bit. So what could Google do in the Pixel Watch 5, the future pie in the sky imaginary watch that doesn't exist yet? Well, I've got a couple of wish list items. First up, and the most major one I really hope Google does, and hopefully they're watching this video, is an ultra version of the Pixel Watch. Now, one complaint I had with the Pixel Watch 4, even though it's a good looking watch and it fits my wrist relatively well, I really wish they came out with an ultra version of this watch, something that was a little bit more robust and maybe had a sapphire display and like a bezel around it, and was a larger case size that could house a larger battery. Because Google has made some really impressive gains with their battery life on this watch with the Pixel Watch 4. Even though it didn't grow in size, it didn't get much bigger or heavier, they were able to cram significant battery life improvements on this watch with optimizations and a new chipset and all of that fun stuff. But just imagine for a minute, if they took all of that technology, crammed it into a larger case with a more durable and robust build, maybe added an extra button or two, and put in a much larger battery that could get us like 4 or 5 days of battery life on a single charge while doing GPS activities, and maybe sprinkle in a couple of extra nice to haves like a built-in flashlight or something like that. That would be pretty awesome, and honestly, it might sway me to start wearing a Pixel Watch on a daily basis. So that's my number one wish list for the Google Pixel Watch 5 in the future. A ruggedized ultra version would be super cool. Let's talk more realistic expectations though, because even though I really want that ultra version of the Pixel Watch, I don't know if it will ever happen. But let's talk satellite communication. So the Pixel Watch 4 has satellite communication, like I said. However, its only use case is for SOS or emergency purposes. If you're out in the wild without your phone, you have no cell connection or LTE on your watch, you can still call for help, which is really cool. However, like we saw on the Apple Watch here, Apple's been doing non-emergency satellite communication and location sharing on the new Apple Watch Ultra 3. And that's why I do think it's a pretty safe bet to say that I do think Google will bring non-emergency satellite communication to the next iteration of the Pixel Watch. Okay, next up, Garmin. Now, Garmin is going to be a tough one to talk about in this video because they have so many different watches, from the Forerunner series to Fenix to Venu, Vivo Active, and within all those categories, there's like 60 different SKUs, different sizes, the Instinct series, outdoor, indoor, health, fitness, running, there's a lot. So I'm just gonna stick with a few models here, which I think will come out in the next year, and then we'll talk through them. So to kick this off, I wanna talk about the Garmin Fenix line. This is the Garmin Fenix 8 I have here, and I'm also wearing the Fenix 8 Pro on my wrist. Now, I'm sad to say my prediction for 2026 is that we will not see a successor to the Fenix 8. Keep in mind, this watch with the Fenix 8, the series started just a little over a year ago, and because of that, Garmin has typically been on like a 2 or 2.5 year cadence with releases of a new Fenix. So in 2026, will we see a new Fenix 9 or whatever it might be? I don't think so. We might see new variants pop up, like we just saw the Fenix 8 Pro pop up a couple of months ago with satellite communication, which was really cool, even though it's very expensive. But I don't know if there's going to be additional variants with more features or any differences. What I do think we'll see, though, is an update to the Garmin Forerunner 570 and the Forerunner 970 here. And I say that for a couple of reasons. First of all, when it comes to the Forerunner 570, I feel like this watch was fairly underwhelming when it was released. It was fairly expensive, and it lacked a couple of features that we saw on other similarly priced Garmin models. For example, the 570 here compared to the Garmin Venu 4, they're nearly the same watch at a similar price point, but like the Venu 4 got a flashlight where the 570 didn't. So I do think in 2026, the Forerunner 570 will get bumped up to like a 575 or 580, and I do think they will include the flashlight and a couple of the other features we saw from the Venu 4. Now, when it comes to the Forerunner 970 here, this is the flagship Forerunner watch, and this watch costs $800 in the USA at the time of filming this video, which is not inexpensive. And the thing about the Forerunner 970 that I find interesting is that it does present a unique opportunity for Garmin to take some of their flagship Fenix features and trickle it down into the Forerunner models. And one example of that I can think of is satellite communication, like on the Garmin Fenix 8 Pro I have here. Typically what we've seen from Garmin is that they add features to the Fenix line first, and then those trickle down into other lines of their watches. For example, Forerunner. We've also seen it go the other direction, where the Forerunner like 965 got a feature before the Fenix 7 at the time. But I do think in this case, we might see some variant of the Forerunner 970 with satellite communication. I think that would be really cool in this like slim, low profile watch. Another feature that could make its way to some sort of Forerunner 970 variant could be micro LED. Now, if you've been paying attention, the new Fenix 8 Pro has a variant called micro LED. It's $2,000 for that unit, and it comes with some compromises. For example, even though it's at a super high price point and the case of the watch is fairly large, it does not have great battery life because of that micro LED technology. Now, micro LED is super interesting because it gets insanely bright. It goes up to like 5,000 nits of peak brightness, where these AMOLED displays we have here, they peak at around 2,000 nits, which is still really good. That topic of micro LED is confusing though, because this is going to be completely based on how well the Fenix 8 micro LED version sold. If they didn't sell any of those watches, I have a hard time believing that they'll actually stick with that moving forward. And if the sales were way lower than expected, they might just drop that technology altogether for the time being until it matures enough to a point where they can incorporate it more affordably and more efficiently in terms of battery life into future models. So I'm actually not sure which way my prediction goes, whether they'll keep micro LED and move it into other models, or if they're just going to drop it all together and leave it behind until some future date. All I know right now is that micro LED on watches is very rare, and pretty much your entry point is that $2,000 Fenix model. So it'd be cool to see it trickle down to more affordable options. I've got one more prediction for Garmin that I want to talk about in this video, and this one's kind of a big one that I do think could change their marketplace, their market share in a certain segment. And that is with something like this. What I have here is the Amazfit Helio band, but this also goes for the Whoop band, which I have around here somewhere. I think Garmin is going to come out with a Whoop band competitor in 2026. We've seen lots of rumors about this online, where there was like a little image leaked from a Facebook account from Garmin, and it kind of looked like a Whoop band, but kind of didn't. But still, that image does tell us that Garmin could be thinking about this, and I think they could execute this really well. Whoop is kind of the gold standard when it comes to these screenless devices, but as time moves on, we've seen a lot of other companies move into this market. Now we've got the Amazfit Helio band, which is the one I have here. Polar came out with the Polar Loop, which I've reviewed on the channel. There's the Hume Health band. There's the Panther band. There's a bunch of these screenless wristbands or armbands that you can wear to track your sleep and all-day health metrics. And Garmin, at its core, has all of the features of the Whoop band or the Amazfit band already built into Garmin Connect. You've got body battery and stress tracking, you've got your sleep metrics, and a lot of insight into your everyday health. The one stipulation is right now you gotta wear your watch or you gotta wear their index sleep monitor thing, which I have here, which is kind of like a Whoop band, but not quite, because it's not designed to be worn all day. It's more of a sleep thing. I think in 2026, sooner than later, we're going to see a Whoop alternative from Garmin, and I am personally very excited about it. The next brand I want to talk about is COROS, because COROS is also fairly predictable with their releases, and I do think the next one that's coming in 2026 will be the successor to this watch, which is the Vertix 2S. However, the successor to this watch will not be called the Vertix 3, which you would think. It will be called the Vertix 4. And that's because we've seen other releases from COROS, like the COROS Pace 4 here, and the COROS Apex 4 here, where they're trying to sort of standardize on their model names. So I don't think we'll see a Vertix 3, but we will see a Vertix 4. Now, what will the Vertix 4 have in store? Well, first of all, I'm pretty sure it's going to have an MIP display. It seems like COROS is really, they're really staying the course with the MIP display and trying to hone in on that market of people that really like MIP over AMOLED. And I think the Vertix 4 in the future will have even more battery life than the Vertix 2S here, which already has crazy battery life. On top of that, I'm pretty sure they're going to add the speaker and microphone that we saw in a couple of other models from them, like this Apex 4 here, used for taking voice notes and marking locations and things like that. And the final feature I think that will come to the Vertix 4 will be a built-in flashlight. They're kind of the odd man out at this point. So we've seen built-in flashlights from Garmin, obviously, but Amazfit did it, now Suunto did it, and COROS is certainly next in line to have that built-in flashlight. And that'd be really cool because they've always had really good battery life. It would be nice to have that built-in flashlight in sort of a overall competitor to something like the Suunto Vertical 2. Another watch I think we'll see from COROS is the COROS Pace Pro 2. So the Pace Pro came out before the Pace 4. It featured an AMOLED display and not a MIP display. It has maps and all that stuff. But then they released the Pace 4 here, which has some features that the higher spec Pace Pro doesn't have, like the built-in microphone. So I think the Pace Pro 2, whatever that might be, will be a lot like the COROS Pace 4 here. However, it will be bigger with a larger display with maps and feature the built-in speaker and microphone, just like the future Vertix 4. Okay, next up, I want to talk about Suunto. Now, this one is probably going to be kind of boring because the Suunto Vertical 2 and Race 2 I have here are brand new watches that just came out this past year. The Vertical 2 was like a month ago. So I don't think we're going to see a major update to either of these flagship models. We might see like a new color variant or new band or like a raw titanium version of the Vertical 2 or something like that, but I don't think we're going to see like new technologies or a whole new watch come up over the next year. With that being said, I do think that Suunto will focus their efforts on their budget category of watches, like the Suunto Run series. That watch is fairly new as well, but as we've seen, that price category has become super competitive, and I feel like another mid-tier watch from Suunto is needed, because right now we have this lineup of watches that goes from the Suunto Run, that's currently around $200 here in the USA, and then jumps all the way up to the Suunto Race 2 here, which is like $500 to $600. So a significant price gap there that could be filled with some sort of mid-tier watch that could represent a really good value if they kind of took all the things from all of these watches and aggregate them all together. So if we got a similar build quality to the Suunto Run to keep it lightweight and affordable, but then we got like increased battery life, a better display, and the built-in flashlight from the Vertical 2 on a watch from Suunto that was around $350, I think that would be a banger, and a lot of of people would be interested in. I would also like to see Suunto focus some effort on their app experience as well. I do like their app, but it is missing a couple of things. For example, you cannot pair more than one watch at a time to the Suunto app. And I know that doesn't matter for a lot of you out there, but for me in particular, obviously I have a lot of watches on the table here. It drives me nuts that I can't pair the Race 2 and the Run to the same app and then aggregate the data together like every other app out there. Like they all do that. Why doesn't Suunto? Moving right along into the next brand I want to talk about, and that is Polar. Now, Polar is in a really interesting position right now here in late 2025. I don't know if you've noticed it, but if you go on Amazon and you live in the USA right now, this watch is currently $1,000 US. This is the Polar Grid X2 Pro. So the price of the Polar Grid X2 Pro has actually gone up significantly throughout this year. That's due to all the things in the world going on right now. I get it, but it's made Polar, it's really put them in a corner in terms of price to performance ratio and how they compete with all the other brands out there. Another weird thing that happened this year with Polar was that they released a new watch called the Grid X2 Non-Pro. I actually made a video about that a while ago. But that watch was supposed to be like a budget version, sort of a stripped down version of this watch. And even that watch currently on Amazon is over $700 here in the USA. And for these price points, you do get a really nice watch. Like this is a beautiful bezel and sapphire glass, and it comes with a leather band in the box. Really cool. But when it comes to the performance and features of this watch, it's having a hard time competing with other watches at $1,000 price point. So what do I think the future holds for Polar? I'm going to speak closed-minded here in the USA. I think they're going to double down on the Polar Loop. So the Polar Loop, if you missed it, is another Whoop alternative. It's a screenless device you wear on your wrist. I made a full review about this a while back. And in that review, I didn't give it the most glowing review because it has some issues, but that's where I think the efforts will go. Polar's probably going to focus on optimizing the Polar Loop to make it a more viable option to something like a Whoop Band or the Amazfit Helio strap or whatever else comes out in 2026 with a better app experience, updated accuracy, and all of that fun stuff. When it comes to Polar, I also think the other major update we'll see from them will come to the Polar Flow app on your phone. And I know this because I have some insider knowledge with this. When I spoke to Polar a while back during the Loop launch, they actually showed me some screenshots and previews of all of these screens within the Polar Flow app. And I can tell you firsthand, it looks really good. They're planning to overhaul the entire user interface and make it more modern and easier to look at, and all of the data will be on less pages. You won't have to fumble through a lot of information to see what you want to get to. Moving right along to the next brand, and that is Amazfit. Now, Amazfit has been up and coming for a while now. They've become pretty popular here in the USA now, and they're even available in stores like Best Buy and Target. You can go buy an Amazfit watch at Target now, which is pretty interesting. The thing about Amazfit is they release a lot of products. They release a lot of devices every single year, and you can kind of assume that they're going to update the watch that you have now to something new next year. I'm not going to go through the entire product catalog because they've actually got quite a few watches now, but I do think they will update the Amazfit T-Rex 3 or T-Rex 3 Pro to something like a T-Rex 4 or even a T-Rex 3 Ultra. That new watch will likely have the built-in flashlight from the T-Rex 3 Pro, the speaker and microphone, but I do think they will give it a new design aesthetic, so it won't be this sort of octagon shape, hopefully more of a round shape I would like to see. And I do think they might put some sort of premium build on it as well to warrant a slightly higher price point, which will be interesting. That's my prediction, at least. I don't know if it will come true. On top of that, I do think we'll see updates to the Amazfit Active 2 with an Active 3 because that seems to be selling really well for them. I'm not sure what they're going to cram into that because the Active 2 is a really solid watch for the price point. And I do think we will get an Amazfit Bip 7 update from the Bip 6. That is their budget or entry-level watch, which is pretty impressive for a sub $80 watch. Now, what could they do in the Bip 7? Well, if they put in a built-in flashlight on a sub $80 watch, I think that would really shake up the marketplace. So that would be interesting. And finally, with the Amazfit Helio strap that came out in 2025, this has gotten a lot of attention over the past year, and I do think they'll do something with this. I don't know if they'll update the hardware itself with like a new pod or something like that, but I do think they will add more features to the Helio strap, and I think they will double down on accessories for the Helio strap, like additional armbands, or even like what Whoop did by building pockets into your clothes or something like that. Another thing I would like to see from Amazfit is NFC integration on their watches. Now, the weird thing about Amazfit is that they do have the hardware capabilities to use NFC for contactless payments, like a lot of these other watches. However, for whatever reason, there's some limitation of these watches because it's a Chinese company and they're used in the USA. I don't really know. So you can't actually use NFC even though the hardware is capable of it. So I'm hopeful in 2026 they can get past that barrier, add contactless payments, and maybe even find a way to integrate in some sort of third-party music thing, Spotify or something like that. Because right now, the only way to have integration with a streaming service on your watch is to buy an Apple Watch, a Google Watch, or a Garmin. That's pretty much it. Okay, final brand I want to mention in this video, and that is Samsung. Now, if you follow my channel, you might have noticed I did not review a Samsung watch in 2025. That's for a couple of reasons. But I do think Samsung will do a couple of things in 2026 that might gain my attention. Now, the first is going to be a major redesign to the Galaxy Watch Ultra. The Galaxy Watch Ultra has been around for a while now, and they have updated it, but they have not changed the design of it. So I do think moving into 2026, we might see a tweak to the design, and that might include the rotating bezel that we saw on the recent Watch 8 Classic. And when it comes to the standard and classic Galaxy watches, I think 2026 is going to be more of an iterative year in terms of the hardware. I don't think we're going to see a big change in how they look. We might get an update in terms of like the chipset or efficiency or battery life, but largely the outside of it is probably going to look the same. But I do think they will lean more heavily into all the AI features that AI Samsung Health has been working on, which should be no surprise. That's going to be all these brands. It's going to be AI everywhere all the time. And I think that's all of the brands I wanted to mention in this video. I don't know which of these predictions will come true. Hopefully some of them do, but I really want to hear from you in the comments down below. What brand do you care about, and what do you think they're going to do in 2026? Let me know down there. I would love to hear from you. And after you're done commenting, as always, make sure to hit that thumbs up and subscribe button down below because that really helps me out. And after you do that, also make sure to check out this video's description down below where you will find links to all of the watches and wearables I talked about in this video. And after you do that, of course, check out ChaseTheSummit.com, where we've actually got some new merch. This is the new Tri-Peak Chase the Summit hat. I'm actually a big fan of it. Probably what I'll be wearing on all of my runs moving into 2026. Hopefully you like it too. Okay, that's it for this kind of silly, fun video. Hopefully some of these things come true, and hopefully this video doesn't age poorly. I guess we'll see. Okay, I'll see you in the next one. Bye.